head into things.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Neil, for joining us today. And I suppose we've got some preset questions for you, which you're aware of. So if you don't mind, we might just start with the first question, and just wanting to hear just a bit of your story and just a bit about the company and where you're from, essentially.
Well, I'll start with the company because that's easy. I don't think anybody really likes talking about themselves, but like you said before, DXC is a large global company. It's across 70 countries. We have about 130,000, although that's increasing on a daily rate. So we're actually employing, our employment factor here is about, we've got hundreds of jobs open in Australia right now. And we have an increasing threshold and appetite for more people, especially coming from defence and the emergency services sector. Makes a good fit. So my background a bit is I spent about 6 years in the Australian Army in the 1st Armoured Regiment in the tanks, and then I went to the military police for a little bit, and then I progressed out of there and had a couple of years in transition hell, which is where we tend to find ourselves coming out of defence, and then joined the Victoria Police Force. At the same time was offered a role in New South Wales as well. And I come from New South Wales and Tamworth, but being in Victoria forever and having a lot of mates down there, I decided to go down the VicPol. So I spent around 13 to 14 years down there. Did a lot of jobs, did general duty space, I was on a police solo for about 3 years, did the Commonwealth Games traffic and transport security overlay for the Commonwealth Games for about 3 years. That was a big learning curve. I've been upgraded to senior sergeant and to sergeant. And then I was working in the technology space with a couple of our projects like in-car video in the day, all that sort of new emerging technology, you might say. And from that, I was poached pretty much by Crimtrac, which was a federal law enforcement agency, and went to Canberra as an executive over there, spent about a year with them. Didn't like it, just didn't like it straight out. Didn't meet my values, the values that I'd been with Victoria Police, and then decided to move from there and went from various roles through to CIO for the Crime and Corruption Commission here in Queensland. Then merged into cybersecurity, coming out of that space, and now firmly in the cybersecurity space, which is quite dynamic and quite challenging and quite large. And so I sit there at the moment as a senior exec, and I run large profile clients. So I was running Queensland Rail's security portfolio and a few others. But now I'll be moving into this this veterans, DXC veterans program, which we've developed, which this is part of. It focuses more on the military space, but we have a law enforcement contingency as well, given that we have a large number of national security type of roles that we're recruiting for. So there's some I guess some flexibility in that space, which is great. Being a police officer myself for so long and working in a range of sort of roles, I've been lucky enough to sort of, I guess, get a better understanding about what it takes to transition out, and then being in the workforce and learning that learning curve. I've been in that path. Both twice, basically transitioned twice, so got 2 scars. And now that I'm in DXC, I've got the level of influence that I need to make these sorts of things happen and provide that expert advice on recruitment and training and what we'd like to see from candidates moving forward. What you need to do as a emerging police officer or first responder, how to market yourself, how to be above and be that sort of differentiator out there. What to talk about in interviews. I was listening to some of the comments before about wage discussions. I have some comments we can make on that. But yeah, so we're a big company. We're in all states in Australia. I'm working from home. I've worked from home since COVID. Most of us do. Some of our guys work on site, especially in defence and NatSec industries. We run everything. We run government. We run all sort of health. We run multiple business, airports, banks, infrastructure. A lot of the stuff you will never see us DXC being promoted in that space, but we run all the banks, security. We run a great deal of underground covert stuff running all across the, I guess, the IT space. So that's basically about us. Over to you. What's the next question for me?
Love it. I've got a million questions, but I'll try and stick to the pre-script to be kind. So just even listening to you, because you've done 2 transitions yourself, and I suppose coming from that angle which, you know, our participants go through in terms of experiencing it from that side of selling yourself to also the side of your, you know, you recruit people too and you've got your teams. The second question is about, you know, do you have any tips that even from your personal experience to maybe what you've learned and being in the position now, do you have any tips around how to nail a job interview?
Ooh. You win some, you lose some. I think I've been in some job interviews that have been absolutely horrendous, and you sit there and go, "What the world was that all about?" I've been in ones where you are absolutely pumped up and sure that you've won the role, only to find out that you were never in the running in the first place. I've been in a ton of interviews where they've had somebody in mind in their own business, and they wanted to bring someone to sort of measure them against and offer them their own role. So you never had a running in that space. You were just a balance off about an industry sort of equivalent. There's been roles that I've turned down, a lot of roles that I've turned down after interview, doing a reasonably good interview, because it didn't fit my perceptions, I guess, my values. And I think it's very important to understand that when you go an interview, the most important thing for you as an interviewee is you are interviewing the business. And when you come out of law enforcement and the first responder space, you have a set of skills and attributes that you are quite well aware of. And you also have a very strong ethical standards, personal values space. And you understand what's right and wrong, and you've lived by those rules and those guidelines for so long, and you install them in your junior officers and the like. And you take that with you. Now, when you come up to an interview and that's not resonating with you, step out. Don't be as afraid to tap out. It's only an interview. You may find that they come back to you and say, "Hey, listen, we really value the fact that you've actually stood up and said this, and we want to have another conversation with you." The interesting thing is I've gone for in my resume, I've got a lot of government roles. So I've gone basically from government to government to government, then stepped down into the commercial space. In the government space, it is regimented. You sit into interview, they ask you preset questions. And as a police officer, certainly one interview I went into, they said to me, "Oh, look, we've read your resume. Look how wonderful it is, all this experience in law enforcement, blah, blah, blah." That's great. I said, "Yeah, thanks." And then she proceeded to tell me, and these are senior people, she proceeded, her next question was obviously off the statement, "Tell me about a time when you've had a difficult conversation." And I literally choked and went, "Really? So you want to talk to me about how great I am in my policing career and stuff, and that's great. I really appreciate that. Then you ask me how give me an example, or when didn't I have a confrontational, challenging conversation at 2:00 in the morning?" And we all in this space can tell some horror stories about what we've had to do in our workplace. But that just resonates with some people who just don't pay attention to what they're talking about. So you need a question, is that the role for me? Because if they're not paying attention in the interview, how are they going to pay attention in the workplace? And so you're going to be immediately challenged, especially with some people who are quite tactical in their operational skill set. So there's some good tips in terms of be very clear and ask questions. And read the body language in the room. So in the roles that we've done, you're very well aware of people's body language, and you're reading that all the time. You go and talk to an offender or a crook, or you go and deal with a traffic accident, or you go and deal with some parents and things like that. You're always reading this operational safety awareness space. You're actually reading it in the room with these people. And there's been times that I've been in interviews and I've just gone, "No, I just know that guy is not going to suit my personality, and I don't need to be in this interview because that's the leader of the position," right? And there's been times I've been in interviews and they say, "Look, this is not a technical role, it's a leadership role." And then they progress to say, "Tell me how you would harden the system on your, harden your infrastructure." I just looked at them and went, "This is not a technical role. You might have to harden some systems. That is a technical role. That is an architectural role. So what do you want?" And so don't be afraid to question the questioners. Hold your ground, because the more you learn in your interview space, the more you can be comfortable this is the position for you. And there's so many roles out there right now. You have the world's your oyster. So some of the things that I've learned is about just be very true to yourself. Don't take the first role off the book, so to speak. A lot of people who are getting out of this sector come with a great deal of experience and some personal challenges themselves. So don't step down or step to the side for the sake of having to get a job. There's plenty of jobs out there. Be true to yourself. And I think as long as you're true to yourself and you get some good guidance and good mentoring and position you with how to language up meetings and space, because there's some acronyms you need to drop and some examples you need to sort of stay away from. You're well sure to get a good interview.
Fabulous. And I really loved how you were talking about, well, being true to yourself, but also you were very strong in your values. And I think that one of the things that we work with is about the ideal conditions and what, you know, what you value and what you're looking for. And I really loved how you just said it's okay to, you know, be true to yourself. And if it doesn't feel right, and also about trusting your instincts, because that's what I think most police are really good at. You can kind of sense that. So it's about knowing that you also have a voice as well, and you can also ask questions. Because what I'm noticing is a lot of people will say to me, "Oh, can I ask that?" Or, you know, "Can I ask, you know, about flexibility?" Or is that okay? Like, because they're so used to maybe internal processes. So that was really cool that you said that, because especially if your you know, experience and position, it's nice to hear that. And I don't know, Gordon and Neil, if you have any input or you'd like to ask a question while we're going through them, just either jump in or raise your hand. But I'll just ask now, do you have any comments in relation to what Neil said so far?
Well, for me, the thing that stood out was the suggestion that we should, you know, don't be afraid to challenge the interviewer. That was something that was probably never in my playbook. But, it's interesting.
You'd be surprised what you hear, right? There's some really funny stories I could tell, but there's some examples about, you know, you're being interviewed for a role and you start questioning, and I'm a believer in that. There's nothing you can't ask, right? Interview or not, there's nothing you should be afraid of asking. And as police officers, like, we've been asking questions of crooks and the environment and the community forever. And people say, "Oh, you can't ask that." Why not? Well, it's a question. I want an answer to it. You know, I'm seeking more knowledge. And you can frame those questions to be quite conciliatory and quite empowering to everybody. But the fundamental fact is that I think if you don't ask questions, if you came to interview for me and just sat there and went, answer, here's an example, thank you very much, and wipe your hands up, I'll be going, my question to you would be, why are you asking me questions? I haven't given you this role, and we haven't got time to do this role in its entirety. So if you want a role that's going to be challenging and you know, something that's rewarding for you, and I'm not giving you what, you know, the complexity of the role and the dynamics and probably some of the politics behind it so you can be successful, and you're not asking me questions, then I'm thinking you're not the right person for the job, because you don't have that insight to find out or dig deeper. Now, as in the policing sector, particularly, we're all investigators. We all have questions to ask. We all want to dig into stuff, and we can dig ourselves in a bit of trouble at times. But the point about in an interview is that if you go in with a set list of questions, it's like your salary thing, right? Oh, you can't ask that. Ask salary. Shh. Really? I actually asked salary before I even put in a resume in. Why? Or am I going to waste my time? And I'll give you an example. In my level, my level is a chief information security officer. So that could go anywhere from about 200,000 to 2 million. That's the price range of a CISO, depending on what industry you're in. Finance is more and the like. So I want to know, before I invest a lot of time in resume shaping and mentoring, getting my interview technique and polishing myself up, which is quite an effort in some of these senior roles. Before I go into that effort, I want to question the contact person, and I'll make that call, as I think we generally do that in policing these days, or have done. Make that call and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you more about the role." First of all, you're making contact with the people, which is awesome, right? And you're talking the talk. So you're already breaking the ice. So you can spit on that call for 20 minutes and have a really good conversation. And you can even start talking about some home stuff, from friendship stuff, you know, banter, and you break that relationship down a little bit to be more conciliatory. And you'll find you'll get more interviews that way, because they actually want to talk to you more if you're a friendly person and you have a genuine interest. But ask, look, what's the range of this? There's no pricing or there's no salary gap here. What sort of range could I expect in this role? And they're going to answer you. So it's about, you know, it's anywhere from 75 to 95,000 or 100 to $200,000. And you say, was that his salary or wage? And ask those questions, because you need to know if it's wages, what wages is it, and what are my times, you know, what am I working a day? If it's salary, and we'll get onto this a little bit more, if it's salary based, what component of that is super, what components other stuff. So I might say you might advertise a job, or you might see a job for 150k, or say 180, 160k, and you think, oh great, that's a really good pay scale for me, 160, 170, 180k. But there's a component in super and offset costs and stuff. And then the thing that you may not know is there's also, depending on the role, there could be some breakdowns about what's your risk-based approach if it's a sales role rather. So what's your base salary, then what's at risk if you don't do the sales space, or things like what the expectation on time frame. So you might be asked to, this is $180,000, this is what it is. We're going to take 10% of that off in super. There's insurance costs on that, and there's other costs on auxiliary costs on that. Gets down to about 140, and then they might say, and it's you're on call 24/7. Yeah, wait a minute. And what does that look like? Well, typically on call means you work from 2 to 4, depending on our offshore people, the teams. And so you could be talking to India at 3 o'clock in the morning or the UK for 3 o'clock in the morning. Do you really want to be doing that after doing a full day's worth of work? Does the missus and the family really do you really? I mean, that's a discussion you have to have. But ask the question, because it shows that you have the integrity of investigation. And generally, I want you as a prospective employee to ask me all the questions, so you get a good sense of what you're in for and a good sense of how I can support you moving forward if I'm a DG manager.
Excellent
Gordon.
advice, thank you. Sorry, that was excellent advice. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Gordon and Neil, like, what do you feel your level of comfort? I mean, I know Anthony said about his and that, asking about salaries and asking directly. What's your kind of level of comfort on a scale of 10 of asking directly, or maybe before before you interview or before your application?
I have no comfort zone. I'm very uncomfortable with the whole thing at the minute. Having 30 odd years in policing in two states, I have no idea what I can bring to the table. And I was looking at the DXC website actually just before we started to get a bit of background on Neil, check his personal brand and all that stuff. And I see there's a number of jobs there, and a lot of those I don't think I've got any hope of applying for any of them. But that's a different story altogether.
Well, let's touch on that for a second, okay? Because that's interesting, right? It's really interesting you said that. So we can't fill positions. I can tell you right now, the workplace in the IT sector and the cybersecurity sector is a critical mass. We literally cannot find a number of people. Like, we've got 70 jobs, for example. We don't even advertise because we can't find them. And then we got a couple of hundred on that website, I suppose. But the thing about it is I keep saying to people, and this is what I want you guys to take away, is that you look at those jobs, right? I look at them and go, I look at those jobs today and I go, oh, that's too high for me. I can't do that. And I have that mindset in the back of my head, even the jobs that got for guys that actually work for my managers. And I look at it and go, oh, geez, that's a bit, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I've got the skill set there. And gee, that sounds like a bit out of my field, when it's actually my employees role. And look, I've got to sit back and go, hang on, check yourself, brother. Really, what is the lay of the land here, right? So DXC puts out a lot of roles that say senior. We want a senior person for this. We want an experienced professional in that. We want all these senior roles. The reality is we just need people who are committed to the task. So you have to read through that, right? And the best way to do that is developing your network, because I can tell you now, we tap more people on the shoulder than we go to interview. The jobs you're seeing right now is probably 80% of the jobs that are out there, and the rest is simply knowing someone in the business and going, I know that Gordon's got these skill sets. Hey, buddy, do you want to come and do some work with us? And we'll put you on this role, and we'll pay you 150K to run this particular piece of work. Now, I'm not technical, and I need you to understand that I'm not the guy who sits there on the computer. I'm useless at that stuff. I call help desk all the time. I came out of policing with no technical IT skills, and I don't pretend to, but my role is completely different. DXC is a good place to work in terms of shaping your own career, but I've shaped myself into being that leader who encourages my staff and my teams to really lift up and do great work, because I have that capability to lead. As 30 years in the police force, you certainly in that position to, but don't be afraid to shape that out. And if you find a role in there, like in the DXC space, that you're a bit unsure, by all means, reach out. and say, hey, Neil, I got this, I saw this role, what do you reckon? And I will connect you with the hiring manager, and we'll get on a 3-way conversation. And we'll say, righto, Gordon's got this skill set and his resume is here. This is the job. Let's shape that resume to that job to make that fit better. Let's talk to the hiring manager. Let's make sure we actually, Gordon's a good personality fit for the role. And we've got a ton of training in-house that we can train you, because at the end of the day, it's not a body shortage we've got a problem with. It's a technology skill set and a skill set problem. And when we talk about the veteran space, I get access to 6,000 guys and men and women every year from defence. Now, of great variety of different sort of spaces. And it's not that they don't have the skills, because we know as police and the rest of it that we've got a great deal of transferable skill set there. Is they don't have a technical skill set, right? But we can train that. And it only takes about 3 months to train a veteran in a technical skill set. It takes a civilian, a graduate, 18 months to do the same training capacity. So if you think about what you do in the police force, right? If you think about the legislative changes and the frameworks and the regulations that we've had to go through, domestic violence, every year something in domestic violence changes, and you have to, pivot to pick up that piece of paperwork or that reporting structure and, that sort of space. The change management in your roles is just dynamic. And policing is one of the only successful change management places I've ever seen. And that's I couldn't emphasize that more. If you can change with the times, then you're suitable for a role. And if you can lead, and you have done, then you're suitable for a role. We will train you in the technical componentry of it.
We'll look out for my application in 12 months.
Thanks, Neil, for that. That clarified a few things I was thinking myself too, because I obviously have done the same thing and as Gordon, and looked through the website in particular. I looked straight when you said that over a couple hundred jobs you had at Baker. So, where's the job section? Have a quick look and just look through at the sorts of roles. I'm obviously in the Gold Coast, so I'm looking at the Queensland area and thought, well, there's a few jobs there that maybe that and with you talking about your the transferable skills and things like that, I've done a lot of project management within the police and things like that, and that's always something that I've looked at, maybe moving into cybersecurity project management. My friends that I grew up with all said, geez, the stuff you've done in the police, you should just go straight into project management. And I guess that for me is looking at what I need to do from where I am now to make that step across. But from what you're saying, it's more about we've got the base, we've got the skills. It's just a technical skill set. We've got the ability to change and things like that. So I guess where to go to from here to look at moving into say, for example, IT or something like that from this role. You seem to have done very well yourself as moving through. I was involved in car video myself too.
Yep.
When it first came about, and I saw the live scan stuff when it came up and went, I'm not ready to move on yet. Damn, maybe I should have.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
But it's no time like the future, right? It's I mean, the pay expectations these days are insane. Like, we're hiring new people and they're paid more than existing.
Yes.
And we're getting taps on the shoulder at every stage for a wage of nearly 100% increase on other companies. So it's a very dynamic space. But look, in the PM space, and I'll touch on this briefly because we can go into this for hours, right? In the project management space, it's a management space. So fundamentally, when you roll back PM work, it's a management space. So you're managing people, you're managing teams, you're managing work performance, timelines, budgets, blah, 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 blah. It's a management space. You put a framework like Agile, or you put a framework like Prince2 or PMBOK over it. And that is just a framework and a guide for you to move through. And then everybody's off the same hymn book. And you use, Six Sigma tool sets, and you use Kanban boards and all this sort of stuff. And if you don't know about those things, they're not magic, right? This is not secrety squirrel stuff. You sit down with somebody like myself or some of my teams 5 minutes and you go, mate, I get this now. This is easy. This is just a tool that allows me to enter data into, and it does all the magic itself for project management. And I can pick it up and print report and print out a report, and it has all the RAG report on it and all that sort of space. So that's really easy. The difficulty with project management, in my view, is trying to deal with the timeframes and the expectations of the client, and understanding that, particularly for PMs now, is that you must pivot and talk to security. If you don't talk to someone like myself or my teams, then the project's going nowhere, because I won't approve anything that seems to be sort of had approved by the security teams. Because at the end, functionally at the end of the day, if you're doing a project that security hasn't gone oversight on and gone, yeah, you can do that because but I want you to do these components as well, and we'll help you with that. If you don't do that, then I'm just going to turn around and say no. And I'll give an example. So we had I had a PM ring me up one day and said, "Hey Neil, I've got these 4 big new firewalls that I'm handing over to you in 2 weeks." I went, "What the? No, that's not happening. I know nothing about it. I haven't got the staff for that. I don't." And I got pretty ticked off, and it wasn't his fault. I went back up to his leadership and pretty much gave them a bit of a reality check. I can't take on it's like the old, your failure to plan doesn't make it my emergency. Yeah. So in PM work, my advice in PM work is make sure you touch base cyber.
That's common sense. Yeah, you've got to, have all parties, all stakeholders involved and on the board, and they've all got to know what's happening.
Well, there's nothing as uncommon as common sense, right? I know. Yeah, I know it's common sense, and to you and me, that's like standard, standard CDF. But for everybody else, it seems to be lost in translation sometimes. But there's more than enough PM work out there you can poke this ticket. And then you might go into cybersecurity doing that space, and then somebody might tap in the shoulder and say, "Can you do this one over here?" And it might be something you have like cloud migration. You go, "Whoa, maybe not," but then we'll buddy with someone to learn that and do some education courses, training stuff.
Yeah, I figured it's a case of just getting your foot in the door, and then once you're in the door, you kind of your skills and abilities are, I guess, hashed out from there, and then you branch off into different.
Yeah. Well, look. So my advice and my experience is that I got into DXC, and when I got into DXC, I was what they call an ASO, Account Security Officer, and they changed that name to Security Delivery Manager or something similar to that. Anyway, and whilst I was in that role, I was like, okay, I kind of understand that role a bit. I know what to do, but it's all my management skills that came to par. My leadership, man management space, all the stuff you learned in the policing and environment, that in the military environment, all about task and orientation and support and that sort of space. So that resonated with me. It wasn't technical. So an ASO role, you think, oh, it's a very technical role. Not a day in hell. I had a team of 30-something people in a contract that were running these technical spaces, and their managers report to me on a weekly basis. We sit down there and I'd be supporting those guys achieving their work. And it became more of a management understanding practice, and then you're getting hit by a lot of other things in terms of new technology and stuff. So you learn on the go, new stuff. You cannot. Cybersecurity is such a broad space, right? Nobody's ever going to know about cybersecurity because it's everywhere. There's operational space. There's finances, all the business towers as well, all the legislation, the frameworks, and it goes on forever. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is that once you get into a company like DXC, you are the master of your own destiny. You really are. And if you take it from my experience, I started off there. I now am a senior executive. I now started up the DXC Veterans Program in December last year. I got asked to do it. And now I'm the global leader in this space across all our countries for the Veterans Program. And I'm leading teams of military and police veterans and from all over the globe in developing a framework about how we transition people from where you are and where defence guys are into our businesses and the like, with all the support networks behind that. And I'm also doing the university master stuff, so I help them develop that course, and it goes on and on and on. Yeah. It's how you want to work, I think. And I'm a big believer in don't ask permission, ask forgiveness. And in this company this big, we need people like that to take that level of commitment on and move these projects ahead, taking people with them, and then say, look, I haven't got time to discuss it with you. This is the cut down version. We need to move forward, and I'll catch up with you next week and we can have that debrief. As long as you guys are smart enough to do that. So, but don't underestimate your power to do that. That's your mistake. Don't ever underestimate what you guys can do, because you've got it in you. You're 30 years or so behind you. So.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
What's my next question?
Everyone's going to want to work. I think I might lose some of my colleagues. Listen to this. Everyone wants to work for Neil. You're a ledge. So I think you've covered a bit of the questions, but I wanted to ask you something about your insights on managing expectations. So a lot of the people, that are coming through, our program, they are in senior roles and they have some of them are earning quite decent money.
Mm.
And of course, like in your industry, I think that, you're paid quite well, but, for some that are wanting roles in maybe non-government or non-for-profit or things like that,
Yep.
I suppose what's your thoughts around that, and maybe some advice, even on your journey? And I suppose I'm looking at like how to help people transition and almost not start from scratch, but knowing it's okay to maybe take a step down or step aside, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I've done that a couple of times in my career. When I was at the Commonwealth Games, I had a superintendent guy. His name was Harry Hayes, and he was a state traffic advisor. And he said to me, one thing he left with me is a couple of sayings we won't go into, but one of the things he left with me that resonated with was keep your eye on the horizon, and the horizon is not always flat. So look at what's ahead of you. Even if you've got a great job, always look on the horizon to the next thing. If you do that, then you have the mindset to look what's coming, and that can actually it's not always geared towards the next job. It's what's the next project, what's the next technology, what's the next new thing. And COVID is brilliant, right? So I said to my kids, COVID is the biggest opportunity you'll ever have in your lifetime to do something new and cool. And look at it's the biggest sales or security infrastructure and software ever. And we've got all this new technology coming through, and we've got all this new way to do business, and some businesses that have gone down, other businesses have gone up massively. So there's always opportunity there's always an opportunity in challenging times. One of the things I'll make very clear in my perspective about expectations when you're transitioning out is you may sit in a role, and I don't know where you guys sit in your organizations. It doesn't really matter, but some of the things I need to sort of put out on the table, I guess, makes sense, is that if you are an inspector above in law enforcement, right? So you're in the officer rank up to commissioner, or in my case, in the Victoria's chief commissioner. The guys I used to work with are all the ACDCs now, sort of space in VicPol, by and large, and they're all doing their space. If you're in an ACDC role, you should have built your network by now in order to transition out. If you haven't, then your transition is going to be rather challenging, because you haven't built that framework for you to be successful. When you're inspector to, and I don't know what levels of policing there are these days in different forces, but I'd say maybe commander role, right? So say inspector, superintendent, I don't know if it could be, say superintendent, commander, sort of that sort of, not quite AC, not, in that sort of middle space there. You need to make sure if you're in that bracket, then you need to make sure that your network has been built. And I cannot emphasize that enough, is if you don't have a network, you need to start cracking on it. It's not hard. It's not rocket science, but it is a bit of a science in terms of harnessing the network. Now, the thing I can offer in this space is that have a think about where you are today. Have a think about, because you're in law enforcement, you're kind of housed in this law enforcement shell, right? You don't want to go out there too much because people might know that you're a copper or an ambo or a fiery. You don't want to go out there in the national security space because, there's a bit of secrety squirrel stuff, shield that we, as police officers, we sort of go, I don't want to go out there because I don't want to put my threat of people coming to my house, all this stuff, threat to my job, my ESD or internal affairs going, oh, you read that wrong, and there's all that sort of crap. But when you put yourself on the market, or you're about to put yourself on the market, you need to shed that skin off, and you need to go, right, I need to go and build my brand. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. This is probably the biggest challenge, that learning curve for me. So I'll give you an example. So in February this year, I was provided or awarded my professorship of cybersecurity with USQ, and I didn't see that coming. I was like, what just happened there? I've been working with USQ for about 2.5, 3 years, just helping shape up the design of their masters in secure cyber, working with those teams, and I was having a good time. I didn't expect any reward from it. I was just putting the effort into it because I felt there was a a need and a value there. Anyway, so a conversation came on and they said, look, we want to make you a research fellow. I said, I don't even know what the research fellow is, but if that's cool, that's cool. Okay, fine, whatever. Anyway, so I got a letter one day saying, we've awarded you an adjunct professor. And I said, what's an adjunct professor? They said, well, it's a professor that is not academic. I said, that's good because I'm not academic. So while that was great, okay, that's like, wow, you have to unpack what that means. So I took that away and sat down and gave it some serious thought. What do I do with that? Because I'm never been one to put myself too out there because of where I came from. But this sort of says to me, you need to put yourself out there to benefit others in their education process. So I went from about 300 LinkedIns to about 1,500 in about the month. Simply by going, right, I have to approach my LinkedIn profile. I have to go and get some advice. And I did. I went and got some advice. And I got a pathway of success about how you reach out and do this sort of stuff. People want to know you, right? Not just because you're a professor, because I want to know you, right? I have people anywhere from Indian students to CEOs to members of parliament and ministers knocking on my door, say, hey, can we connect? And that's great. And you can't let that ego get to you because it's not about that. They just want to see what you're doing, which is great. So put yourself out there and connect with people. Just reach out. You'll see people and you go, oh, I'd like to see what they're doing. And you connect with them and they go yes or no. If they don't go no, well, poo, bad luck. If they say yes, then you see another framework of people there. And then you can use LinkedIn to shape out how you're perceived. So get on LinkedIn, build yourself a decent profile, have a look at my profile and see what that looks like. Have a look at others in my friends list, I guess you might call it, or my connections, if you can, see what their profiles are, and start to understand about how that marketing opportunity goes. Then have a look at what posts have been put on from your friends and from your connections and all those other people. And pay attention to what they're talking about. So if they want to be an expert or they are an expert or they're emerging as an expert or leader in the field, what are they talking about? You see a lot of ads on LinkedIn. I get smashed with cybersecurity rubbish all the time. And, ransomware, well, ransomware is 8 years old. I mean, it's nothing new, but I'm still getting hit ransomware stuff. But I'm looking for those stories that come out that appeal to the human spirit. So a lot of the veterans defense space, right? The PTSD, that sort of stuff. I read a lot of that, and that really makes me feel more connected, and I need to do more for that community. But the links that come out of that, and don't be afraid to, once you connect, write them a note. I'll write them that email on your chat message thing. You'd be surprised. Like I had a guy the other day, I was in a meeting the other day. Okay, who was it was with? American Chamber of Commerce, American Australian Chamber of Commerce. I was presenting our presentation to them, having a chat with the guys there. Turns out one of the guys messaged me later and connected me with LinkedIn. He's ex-military police like me, but a year before me, and ex-New South Wales police. And now he's the head government liaison guy for 3M. So we're just chatting away, learning more about each other. He's coming up here next Anzac Day in Brisbane. We're going to catch up. I've actually booked him in for lunch. We'll do a lunch. We'll connect. We'll talk about stuff. He'll see what I'm sharing. I'll see what he's sharing. And that resonates with that. And you build this broader knowledge bank. So pay attention to that. But don't be afraid to put yourself on the line and put some stuff out there. Like share some posts, write a post, and then share a picture. And there's ways that LinkedIn works that's more powerful. If you take a photograph that you find on the internet or you have at home that resonate with the story you want to put in, and you put that photograph in, and then you type a story of, a couple of paragraphs about it. Think about this is what this is, and this is why it's important. And then you do your hashtags with the relevant groups, and then you do your links to your mates and stuff and your organizations. That reach of that is massive. LinkedIn is geared to make that reach permeate across thousands of people, not just small groups. So there is algorithms in LinkedIn, and there's tutorials how to do that. So get on LinkedIn, type in your tutorials, and go and do your learning process. Get into it. If you don't build your network, if we don't know who you are before you come out, that's a really tough ask for me to put you on paper, right? And give you an interview. If I can't go on to you, if I'm looking for someone of real influence, I'm going to Google them. If you Google Neil Curtis, Professor Neil Curtis, you bang, first guy on Google. That's great. Don't know how that happened, but that's great. But Google yourself. Google yourself. So and so Queensland Police. So and so Queensland Ambulance. So and so New South Wales SES. and see if you're in those groups, of course, and see what comes up about you. If you're not there, you need to make some changes to get there. You need to actually do something to get there. You need to be recognized, because I can tell you now, as soon as I look at someone, I'm Googling the crap out of them. I'm having my staff Google the crap out of them. And if I'm seeing stuff that resonates, then I'm thinking, geez, maybe he won't want this job because I'm not paying enough for it. Maybe he's worth more, right? But if you're there, that's great. So you need to be known. And that's this is a digital world now. Forget what we used to know in policing and stuff. This is now a digital world, become a digital personality into it. So have a look at that sort of space. One of the other things I'll say is that if you're getting out, don't expect the same level of role, right? And the reason I say this is particularly this reason. In policing particularly, you have a union. You don't have a union in DXC. So if you don't get a, like when I was at VicPol, you had like an EB, and every year you got a pay increase of 2.5%, for example, for the 4 years. And whilst that was okay, in the real world, you don't get any of that at all. That's not a guarantee. In fact, EBs, what's an EB in the business space? You can go back for your salary review. You can do a salary review for DXC, and you can ask for more money and then justify that, and then you may be awarded that depending on your role and stuff. Or you may get thrown another role from another company saying, "Hey, I want to take Neil off your hands for another $30,000," and then I say, "Hey, look, it's offered a job," and they match or beat that. So there's ways to sort of scurry around that sort of space, but my experience is that as you come out into the workforce, you're going to go to salary straight up, because rarely do we do wages in sort of roles like in technology, for example. And if you do roles in technology, it's going to be salary based, and there's going to be some hours to it. So expect to do some hours and some late nights, not so much burning the candle at both ends, but you might have to do a call. I do a call at like 5 o'clock in the morning every 2 weeks to the UK. And then I do calls in the US and Canada and stuff, because I run those programs that go global. So I expect that bit of effort there, which I think everybody's up for that sort of space, right? And besides that, that's a relationship building, and use that relationship that you're building to build your network. But don't think because you're superintendent so-and-so or commander so-and-so or, commissioner so-and-so, you're going to come out and people are going to pick you up for that peer-to-peer level role. That's not going to happen. I guarantee it's not going to happen. It may happen if you've got a good network and people are going to swallow you into another leadership role. That's fine. But when you're coming out, don't be afraid to take that step out, because you are literally starting into a business that focuses on one thing, and that's dollars. And that's the biggest thing I found, I guess, in my last 5 or 6 years, is that DXC as an industry and as a business focuses on the money. It's about making a profit. No profit, nobody gets a job. So you must be focused on making profit. And that, in my world, turns out to be, how can I support my business bids, so the bids for contracts, how do I support that with veterans and the like, to build that Australian industry capability framework, so that the business makes more money. I get a percentage of that back into my program. You giddy up, here we go. And if you find something that, the best place to find is something that you actually love to do. And that's a real hard ask, right? Because that generally is like non-paid work. If you like to fly fish and go and throw a fly rod around, nobody's going to pay you for that as much as you want to be a fishing guide. It's going to be like destitute on money. So you have to sort of find that nice balance. And a lot of the times that's in the non-profit sector. But you can also work like in companies DXC, like I do, and I work with non-profit sectors quite closely, where I actually get to resonate and play in that space, and that actually fills my portfolio of need to help out and to be supportive of the veteran community. And as a result, I have a team of veterans, military veterans, and a couple of coppers and ex-service, ex-defense guys on a weekly meeting, and we just talk about, it's a mentoring space. So I mentor these guys and direct them into their cyber roles and give them training, build them up and all sorts of stuff, which I'm happy to do with anybody. It's just that you've got to put yourself out there, and don't expect the unexpected. There's nothing, and you'll learn that there's nothing more X than ex-copper, right? And that's what I got told. Why don't you go and get a real job and come back in the police force and that sort of thing. Don't be afraid to roll back into policing if you can. Like if you get out and you do 6 months, you go, this is not for me. Then, and you can roll back to policing, roll back to policing. If that's what needs to happen, then do it. Don't be afraid of the stigma, because actually you tried that. You got out, you put your foot in the water and went, you know what, this doesn't suit my family, my needs, my expectations. I'm going to roll back into it. I might take a a career cut, like lose a rank or whatever, who cares? You're back into the job that you know and love, and then you can start to focus on what you want to do in that role again, and it'll be different to what you would do because you came back in and a different consideration. So I guess we could go on about this space forever, but I think it's time to be brave. If you're going to move out with confidence, move out with a set level of expectations and build that network. And if you need help building that network, reach out.
That's amazing. You're so inspiring. I could just listen to you for forever. I'm sure everyone else can.
I think I need a beer after that.
Thanks for being my LinkedIn friend. I feel really special to be connected to you now.
Well, I hope these other blokes connect too. I mean, it'd be good because they can see it and we can chat and we can, connect and I can help them out. So
yeah. So everyone else
Anytime.
that's watching the recording, you're going to be more famous now. Everyone's going to connect with you. Look, there's so many gems, and I was writing some of your words of wisdom down, so I'll be using them on statements to come. But Gordon and Neil, is there anything that you'd like to ask at all while we still have Neil here? Otherwise, I think that we could probably, looking at the time, start wrapping it up, I suppose.
At this stage, I haven't got any more questions, but I'd just like to commend Neil. You've inspired me and given me a lot of hope for a bloke who, I didn't think I had a lot, to offer. But as you say, when we sit down and look at what we do as coppers, we're quite varied. And I've always believed there probably isn't much I can't do after they kick me out at 60. But it's a matter of convincing other employers of that. And you've given us some hope on the insights that you do sort of recognise what we used to do and the value that brings.
Absolutely. So if you're resigning at 60, then you're in Queensland.
That's right. I'm not resigning. I'm being kicked out, basically.
Yeah,
I don't
basically,
want to
forced
I'd love to
resignation.
stay. I love my job and I'd love to stay, but I can't do that, so I've got to prepare for that.
Well, it's 60 years young, right? Because he's still, in my view, and I've got to tell you, because I'm not that far off that age as well, but my view is that you've got, to me, you're the perfect employee, right? That age group, that anywhere from the 40s to the 60s, 65 is a great age group to be employed. You have the commitment. You've worked a lifetime. You know what's important to your workplace and yourself. You can read people well enough not to be stupid, make stupid mistakes, and burn your relationships. And being a copper is so. I guess what you've learned, what we've all learned, is how to navigate tactically the environment to keep everybody afloat. So hook up, and I'm in Brizzy as well. So mate, if you want to catch up, just hook up with me, and you know where to find me on LinkedIn.
I will certainly find you on LinkedIn, and I'd love to catch up. That was awesome. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Neil. I can't say any more than what Gordon said. Thank you for coming on and sharing that with us, and we'll definitely be having a chat at some stage in the future.
Excellent. No, that's great. I'm glad you got something out of it. Sometimes you come onto these things, you go, geez, I wonder if I'm actually going to give any value.
Yeah, I think the people that have done what we're going through is, I guess, really important to get that, to understand that there is something further out there and there is a future, and it's not as bad as, the people that are still in there that are too scared to get out, say, maybe, well, why would you leave this? There's nothing out there. Making that decision and just taking the step and moving out.
Let me tell you a bit of a story. I mean, if you've got time, how much time we got to go?
Yeah, time.
Yeah, okay, bit time.
Much time as you want.
All right. So when I was in the Commonwealth Games space, so I was down in this place called Hastings, it's sort of way out of Melbourne a bit. Anyway, the only office I could have for the guys down there. So I had to go down to Hastings, and I remember meeting up with a copper there, Senior Connie, and he drove up in a black Mercedes sports car, nice car, like in the day, like a good $150,000 on a guy who's on like 70,000. Anyway, he rocked up, and I went over to him, and I already knew him, but I didn't know him well because it was a new office to me. So I went over and said, "Hey, can you go on?" I said, "Mate, how come you got driving that car? Like, what's it go with your car?" because that's a very nice car. And I was obviously in traffic before that too, so I knew my vehicles and stuff because that was my business. And he goes, "Oh, my wife's a lawyer, so we earn enough money to buy it." And I said, "Okay. So what sort of lawyer is she?" He said, "Oh, she's in commercial." I said, "Oh, okay. I don't know much about that space, but yep, okay." And he goes, she's on 500K a year. And I'm like, "Holy crap. Okay, so why are you working?" And he goes, "I'm working for the tax break." So I said, "So what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I shouldn't be working because the more I work, like the work job I do in the police force, because I love the job I do in the police force, it's a tax negative for us. So we pay more tax." And I said, "So what's your plan for the future?" And he said to me, "I need to get out to save tax money on my wife's wage." And that prompted me to think about what is else out there in the community and in the wide world, right? So, because I always thought law enforcement, government, because I came from the military, went into law enforcement, it was all government, and I only ever looked for these bars, but I always looked at these guys who got out and did these other jobs and earned more money than I was in the police force and doing less hours, and thought, how does that work? Now I look at this space and I go, there is more opportunity now for people who are well networked to make a ton more money, if that's your goal, to make a lot more money by selling what's in this head of yours. Everybody has their own IP. Everybody in this call has their own IP. You have your own thoughts, you have your own ideas. It's about taking those thoughts and ideas and shaping that into a product. And when I say a product, what I mean is, I don't mean a thing necessarily. It could be a thing. It could be a technology thing. It could be a phone. It could be a new widget of some description. But it also is the IP about your thoughts and what that contributes to another thing, which could be anything as well. So I know it's a bit confusing. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we all have our different thought processes. We all are experts at something. What are you experts in? Now, it's not what you like. I don't want to get you mistake with that, because I like to do things. I like to shoot my bow. I like to do 3D archery. I like to go back, because I'm a farm boy. I like to go back on the farm and zip around like an idiot at the farm. I like to ride horses. I like to fly fish. It's not that what I like to do. It's what resonates with Neil Curtis that he has an IP on that he likes to do in the workplace that could twist into a job or me as a key person of influence. What's my pitch? So my pitch really in this space is I know a lot about, and I'm very experienced in, the transition from military and the transition from police into cybersecurity, particularly in the cybersecurity world, because I know a ton about that space. So I know what pathway you need to take and what you need to look at to get into a cybersecurity career. And I can advise on that. So my pitch is about, how do I sell that concept? The next thing is, how do I market that concept? Well, I need to write a book. Now, you and I think that, oh man, I can't even write my own name, let alone write a book. Book writing is not what you think it is. That's all outsourced. You just come up with the idea, put it on paper, someone else writes it. Costs you a couple $100 to a couple of grand, and you are the author or authority of that book. And then you look at that product that you develop, not just the book, because that's a product itself, but the idea and the concept and the IP in your head. And you'll be amazed when you sit down there and take a step back and look at, what do I really like to do, and how do I commoditize my IP in my head to make that a valuable, saleable, self-generating income sort of space. And I guarantee you guys will have it, but you just haven't explored that space. Now, when you start making those connections, you'll kind of if you have a bit of a free spirit moment, you kind of resonate and sort of start to get into that lane a bit when you're feeling better and confident about yourself, which we all go through from time to time, right? We all have the really good days where we go, oh man, I love to do this and that's what I want to do, and it's all on my head, and how do I get that out? That's the times you sit back and write your notes and go, okay, and we then bring it to someone like myself, and we'll sit down there and flesh it out and go, this is where we think we need to be, and make those connections in the network. So everything's open to you guys. And the whole concept about getting out of the police force is simply a next step into the rest of your life. For some of us, Gordon, like you, at 60, it's a bit daunting because you're 60, right? So there's no safety net there for another 5 years until your super comes in, or 7 years, or whatever it might be. So there needs to be a space you can work into. But my view is that my firm belief is I have a ton of guys that are your age group working for me right now, working within teams of mine right now that I value highly over the younger guys generation coming up who've got a bit of attitude and sort of stuff, because
Excellent.
you can actually run that space, right? You need to be confident you can do it. That's the thing that I need to build in you, is a confidence to actually take that step forward. But there is stuff out there for all of the guys listening on this call and that are going to see this call. You're not on your own. We all go through the same thing. When I went from VicPol, I stepped out of a 14-year career. I love being don't get me wrong, I love being a copper. And I went into federal and I hated it, loathed it. It was just a massive challenge to my own ethical standards, and I couldn't get out quick enough. And that was a massive. I went from Melbourne to Canberra, family move. It was just a nightmare. If I had my time again, I wouldn't have done it. I probably would still be in VicPol, or I'd have moved out into a local environment somewhere. So, we're all full of our challenges, but it's good to get some time to sort of flesh out and just throw them out to someone to listen to and sort of help shape that future. But I think that's what Fordham is about too, in my view, is that to have those conversations with the Fordham guys about how they flesh it out. And Elise and the other guys Luke comes back to me and says, oh, these are the resumes I've got. And I'll get these resumes of guys like you. And I got one the other day from Mark, or yesterday, and I went, yep, I can, and that's gone straight off to the defence talent acquisition people. If I come back and say, oh, I need to tweak this, need to get on a call with the person, just tweak that, shape this way, change the language a bit, bang, and then I'll say, right, let's get on a call with the manager, hiring manager, and let's get you in front of them to have a conversation and break down the barrier before you go for your interview. That's networking. That's what networking does for you. That's my last 5 minutes.
That's great, and we really appreciate your support and what you do to essentially, it's almost like we call reverse marketing, I suppose, but it's I know from people that you've already supported, it's a real confidence booster, especially people that have been in the job for a long time as well. It's I know that they've said that directly to say, oh my God, so exciting that someone's actually, taking me as not just a cop and they see me for something else. So thanks in advance as well. I'm going to hand it back over to Anthony now to wrap up our lovely session. I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you so much, Neil. You really blew that one out of the water. That was just a fabulous session. And I was just sort of sitting on the edge of my seat here. There was so many gems to take away there. So, and it even got me reflecting about my own career. I thought, goodness me, what's going on here? So
we should all be doing it, right? You should always be, reflecting back on what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, right, you only get one life.
Indeed.
And we've done the hard yards, right? Coppers are all done the hard yards. Soldiers are all done the hard yards. Some have done it harder than others. But reflect on that to position yourself in for the rest of your life so that you can enjoy the rewards that come with some really good work that people can do.
Absolutely. I couldn't endorse that anymore. That was just fantastic. So thank you again. And we've certainly already got you penciled in again for the future. So don't go anywhere. So that will be great. Folks, so that pretty much wraps up workshop 3 in our job skills series. And we've certainly covered a lot of ground across our 3 workshops. And we really hope that your job hunting skills have benefited from the information that we've provided and the great discussions that that have occurred, that we've had amongst the participants, and certainly with our guest speakers over these 3 workshop series. So the workshops, of course, are only a small part of your transition journey, and you'll be continuing to work with your assigned transition engagement officer going forward on all aspects of your own transition plan. And in terms of the material presented this and in the earlier workshop, our team invites you direct contact with us at any time to clarify any of the information that's been passed on or to get further support. And you can certainly contact me directly on my email or through the transition program inbox at transition@fordhamaustralia.org.au. So folks, thank you very much for your attendance today. And for those that are going to be listening to us on the recording later on, all the best to them as well. Thank you, and goodbye, and Merry Christmas.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Neil.
See ya.
Thanks, Neil and Gordon too.
Thank you.